You now have 1 minute to abandon ship. The ship will automatically destruct in T-minus 1 minute.
I will win the crowd. I will give them something they've never seen before.
Indiana, we are simply passing through history. This is history.
Hold on to your butts. Now, what shall we talk about?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in to the final episode of Season 1 of Duel of the Greats podcast, folks. If you've been with us all season, which I hope you have, then you know from last week that we crowned Steven Spielberg the victor of Season 1 Duel of the Greats by a margin, slim margin of 8-7. Now, with all that taken care of, we thought a couple things would be fun this week. First, we just kind of talk about what we learned from the season, from about the directors, about the movies, about ourselves during the show, the first season, and then also get our producer Brandon's take on this, because Brandon is joining us this week more than just a man at the soundboard. He is a man with sound, and he's going to be talking us through what he would have said for each week. And whether he thinks we got it right or wrong. Brandon, thank you for joining us in voice this week.
Thank you for having me. I very much appreciate it.
Hey, anytime, considering we wouldn't have this if not for you. So here we are, our wonderful producer. So let's start off with that. I think that'd be fun. We'll start off with that. Okay. So we got the weeks all pulled up here, so we'll take a quick recap trip through memory lane here, and
before we do
we'll
this,
start. We'll just go through each week.
So I have two things I want to let you know before we get into it. If that's okay?
Okay.
So
sure.
My winner was of 8 out of 6, and I disagreed with
8 out of 6,
like 8 to 6. And
8-6. I see. Even before
and I disagreed with you guys on 4 movies or 4 weeks.
Ooh, this will be interesting.
So, but go right ahead. Let's go do your recap.
It's a lot of weeks.
The real duel. Duel was the friends we made along the way.
Exactly. So, first week 1, first movies. That was our theme there, and the first movies were Steven Spielberg's Duel and Ridley Scott's The Duelists. Of course, the 2 movies that combined gave us the namesake for this show. None of us had seen any of those movies except Nate had seen The Duel, I think, years ago. Duel years ago. So, but that was kind of it. So this was mostly first experience for all of us, and we ended up choosing Ridley Scott's The Duelists as the best. Brandon, what was your take on it?
What was your vote on it? Were all 3 of you? Where was there one?
No. I voted for Duel.
Steve went for, which was off to a great start because Steve, the Ridley Scott guy, voted for Spielberg, and I, the Spielberg guy, voted for Scott, and Ridley Scott won. So that was quite the auspicious start to this podcast here.
I voted with the show with the Duelists.
There we go. All right, 1 for 1. Off to a good start. Second week was Frankenstein week, Monster week. We went 2 of the most famous movies from both these directors, Steven Spielberg's Jaws versus Ridley Scott's Alien. So Spielberg's Jaws out on this one. It's just such an epic, just a touch point cultural movie. I think was kind of, we leaned towards that one a little bit more so than Alien is, even though they both kind of are. So, Brandon, where'd you come out on that one?
So I will say that my vote on this was mostly due to lasting impact for me at the age. So both these movies came out in the 80s to where I'm most impressionable and affected me the longest in terms of just whether I would want to watch it again or not in terms of how good it was. And this would be our first disagreement because I picked Alien. Because that Jaws, I grew up in Southern California. I was in the beach all the time. and like sharks have always been like, they're dangerous, be careful, and it's just kind of like, okay, they're sharks, I know they're dangerous, who cares? Alien freaked me the hell out, and I think it's something that just lasted with me longer. And I like the shark in Jaws just seemed too campy for me every time I saw it, and it just never really. I think that's honestly, I know that's very trivial in all of how you guys broke everything down, but like that I think is what got me the most, and why I tended to lean towards Alien over Jaws.
What was our breakdown on that? Does anyone remember?
I know. As I was going through, I don't know that I could remember exactly. I went Jaws too. I think Steve, you went Alien.
I really don't remember.
I wanted, like, I love Aliens so much. I was kind of leaning towards that, but I think what put it over the top for me is just the sort of just how iconic and groundbreaking Jaws was. Because I think we had talked about without Jaws there is no Alien, because the pitch for Alien to the studio heads was Jaws in space, right? So,
I think that plays a lot into. We've discussed this. I think me and Jeff have a lot, and I know you guys have brought it up at the podcast one time. I'm not a big Star Wars guy, but I know that without Star Wars, a lot of my favorite movies would never exist. I can understand and appreciate what it has done for the genres and cinema in general, but it's not necessarily something that I liked as much as most people.
That's totally fair. Next, week 3, we were at the best movie or Oscar winner week. So the 2 movies, which is still astounding to me that it's only 2 with these 2 directors, but the 2 movies that have won Best Picture from these directors: Steven Spielberg's Schindler's List and Ridley Scott's Gladiator. Brandon, which we came down with Schindler's List.
Yeah, I don't think there's any way you can't pick Schindler's List between
That's a
the
rough
two.
one. That's a rough one.
Clean sweep.
Anything going up against Schindler's List was going to be tough. So,
I still don't think Gladiator is Ridley Scott's best movie.
We'll talk about it later, but the E.T.
What do you think is his best movie?
Then next,
probably Kingdom of Heaven.
Yeah, calling it best movie only in the sense that just by whatever objective metric we have, which is Best Picture Oscar. So yeah, the total subjective nature of films would mean that I wouldn't call it his best movie either, far from it. But because I dropped the line about how I had this is my most overrated movie of all time. We'll keep moving off that. Then we went from best movie to worst movie, which was Steven Spielberg's 1941 versus Ridley Scott's The Counselor, and we went to The Counselor. If I recall, we thought that despite how poor and awful both movies are, and they were bad, that The Counselor at least swung for the fences, even if it whiffed horribly, whereas 1941 was trying for a bunt and still missed.
I agreed with the show, The Counselor.
Like the little baseball reference? My history in baseball podcasting has paid off right there. Boom.
Well, but baseball has enough just in general, comparisons and euphemisms you can use towards all sorts of things.
There's probably the most filmed sport is baseball, I would say. But that's a question for a different podcast. Neither of these 2 directors have done a baseball movie, so far as I understand.
I think Scott would do it.
So
I bet Spielberg would probably do it better for the emotion.
Spielberg would probably do it better, but I bet Ridley Scott would be more apt to do one, right? Because we kind of talked about with movies like White Squall and stuff where he's like, I just want to do one of a certain category, Black Rain, So I wouldn't be surprised if I want to do a sports movie, because Ridley Scott, like William Friedkin, who R.I.P. man, he just passed away a couple months ago while we were doing this show. But
Blue Chips,
the great.
Oh, it's a good
exactly.
movie.
That's what I was going to bring up. Where you just like
all-time favorite
what?
Sports movies. Yeah, I
love Blue Chips, man. That movie's so fun.
It is a great movie, and it is the last time that Shaq was perfectly cast in something. Like he actually works in that movie. As of his
Neon Boudreaux.
Yeah, it's sort of this obviously this fictionalized version of himself, but they cast him perfectly there. It works perfectly in that movie.
Yes, absolutely. And speaking of William Friedkin, I talked about my most overrated movie, Gladiator. One of my most underrated movies of all time, according to the list I made years ago, was Bug from William Friedkin. You all need to check that movie out. It is fantastic. Okay, I don't know if you've seen that.
That actually sounds familiar to me for some reason.
Stars Ashley Judd and Michael Shannon. Very good movie. And Harry Connick Jr. Fantastic. Go watch it. So we went from worst movie to week 5. So at this point we were 2-2, right? Off to a very, very close start to the season. Went to week 5. That was our Playing God week. We talked about Spielberg's Jurassic Park and the Lost World as a sort of bundle compared with Ridley Scott's Prometheus and Alien Covenant, both of which are, Alien sort of, neither were sequels but to Alien, but sort of in that same universe and very clearly in the same themes. So we came out with Prometheus and Alien Covenant on that one, doing a lot of the heavy lifting as Prometheus in that. Brandon, what did you feel?
Same with you guys. I really, really, really loved Prometheus too, and I mean it was like one of those. Like I remember leaving the movie theater and was ready to go back and see it again the next day, just because we wanted to break. Me and a buddy of mine wanted to break down every aspect of it compared to everything we knew about Alien.
For sure. From there, we went to Cyberpunk Detective Week with the 2 Philip K. Dick stories on display here. It was Steven Spielberg's Minority Report and Ridley Scott's Blade Runner. So we went with Minority Report, but Steve was vehement about his Blade Runner choice. So Brandon, where did you come out?
I pulled us to Minority Report on that week. That was one where Steve was really arguing for Blade Runner and had good points.
Yes.
I really thought I was gonna pick Blade Runner, and the more I thought about it and even went back and listened to that episode, I ended up falling with Minority Report. Sorry, Steve.
Boom.
Minority Report was way better than I thought it would be. So it was a really, really
Minority
Report.
Report.
That was a tough week.
Minority Report and War of the Worlds are 2 movies that I think, and I kind of talked about this in my dissertation on War of the Worlds last week, but 2 movies that I felt like, and part of Spielberg's sort of thing is earlier in his career he was a little bit more inventive, but for the last 25-ish years, he's been pretty. He hasn't really brought anything new to the table, but he's perfected what he does to such a degree that it's hard to go against. And Minority Report was a good example of that for me. So we went from that to week 7, Spy versus Spy. Bridge of Spies versus Body of Lies. Bridge of Spies, Steven Spielberg. Body of Lies, Ridley Scott. We went with Bridge of Spies. Brandon,
I
think this was a clean sweep.
I went with Body of Lies on this one.
Really?
Yep.
What was behind that?
So, I want to say I kept up with you guys in like making my picks up to week 10. I remember at the time I wanted to like keep chiming in, but I didn't because I was so in the minority listening to you 3 talk. I couldn't really go back and tell you now, but like if I like made notes, I probably could have had a conversation with you about it. But I remember listening to you guys going like, am I thinking of a different movie? Like I just couldn't in my head like wrap it up to where I pulled it up online and like watched the first
like
15 minutes. Go ahead.
Sorry, no, I think you cut out on my end.
Oh,
and so
I was saying I went through and watched the first 15 minutes just to make sure I was thinking of the right movie, and I was like, yeah, this is the movie I was thinking of. So
yeah, and I think if you're wanting a little bit more action in your spy movie, then Body of Lies is probably gonna
I can tell you that does play into it. Not completely, but that does play into it.
Yeah. Fair enough. From there, we went to week 8. On the Run week, Steven Spielberg's Sugarland Express went up against Ridley Scott's Thelma and Louise. This is another one that's a rough week, but this one was for Spielberg.
Yeah,
I think this is another sweep.
Thelma and Louise, you mean Scott?
What?
Don't you mean you said for Spielberg. Don't you mean for Scott?
Yeah, it was a rough week for Spielberg. Like, it's rough to go up against Thelma and Louise.
Sorry. Yeah, Thelma and Louise, that's one of those movies that I will always and forever just be like, oh, that's on TV, I'm going to watch it. And I just think between those two, that was a pretty easy pick for which movie to go with.
That might have been my favorite movie that I hadn't seen yet in this whole experiment with Thelma and Louise.
Thelma and Louise.
Yeah, what a great movie.
But you went a really long time without seeing that movie.
I know. There's a lot of
And
classics I haven't seen.
An even longer
Don't-
time without
don't
seeing The
ask him.
Silence of the Lambs.
Don't
True,
ask him how
very
long
true.
it's been since he's seen The Godfather, which would be his whole life.
I
We had a
still have
discussion
not
at work
seen the
today.
whole thing.
You know, this is a
A
thing
fellow
that,
coworker.
as long as I've known Steve, he's not seen The Godfather, and even like his mom my aunt is into The Godfather and like loves Marlon Brando and stuff. Now it's almost become comical to the point that I don't want him to ever see it. Like it's almost part of like his persona that he's
On his
never seen
gravestone.
it, and like I almost kind of appreciate that he's gotten this far without seeing it. Like you do you, man, don't see it. It's all good.
Committed to the bit.
I tried. I watched like the first hour of it.
Here
but
lies
I've
Steven
never-
Spielberg or Steven Shepard.
Yeah, I should watch it. It's just such
Here
a
lies
commitment.
Steven Shepard.
Like,
I never saw The Godfather.
You guys should
that
do
trash.
You should do some one-off episodes where you all get to pick one movie none of you have seen, and you all sit and watch it, and then have an episode about it.
That would be fun. We could do a Mystery Science Theater type watch along.
Ooh. I've done one of those before on a podcast. For
For a baseball game or a baseball
Perfect.
movie?
neither.
Neither.
Pitch Perfect took on a life of its own
Oh,
on Royals
Pitch-
Twitter
right.
in the early 2010s, and that's So that was, and I still to this day love the entire Pitch Perfect trilogy. So
My issue
at
there
this
is
point
that there
here-
was a trilogy.
deserved. So moving on, at this point after week 8, we were knotted up again at 4-4. So then we moved on to week 9. War is Hell week. This is the one where we had my cousin Carson on to talk about his experience flying Black Hawk helicopters in the Army, which of course tied into Ridley Scott's Black Hawk Down, which went up against Steven Spielberg's Saving Private Ryan. This was probably one of the tougher weeks, and I definitely think for me, this was one of those weeks where it was tougher than I anticipated. I came in thinking it was going to be a slam dunk for Saving Private Ryan, and I still went that way, as did Nate. But Steve went Black Hawk Down, and it was much closer for me than I thought going in from my previous experiences with the movies. Brandon, where did you come out on?
I actually got a quick question for you about that for the three of you.
What's up?
Did you guys, after talking to Jeff's cousin, did it make it harder for you to make or make it easier for you to make your choice? Taking into his knowledge of not only seeing how they film this stuff, but the accuracy of it, and just listening to his story, did any of that persuade you to go, man, I don't know, I really guess Black Hawk Down really was a good movie or anything like that at all?
I thought his input was just fantastic, but it didn't change my mind of what I thought about the motion pictures. In a way, actually, it probably strengthened my pick of Saving Private Ryan because I felt like what he ultimately talked about, just sort of the nature of humanity and all of us, and like that, I feel like those themes are more prevalent in Saving Private Ryan. So, but it didn't really, for me, it didn't affect my opinion of what I thought of the movies. I thought he was phenomenal and gave great insight, but it didn't change what I thought cinematically.
I don't know that it had a huge impact, but go ahead.
I was just gonna say I also ran with Saving Private Ryan.
It's hard
Wrong.
hard to beat Saving Private Ryan. Steve,
Black Hawk Down. Black Hawk Down should have won.
give us your rundown again. Because I didn't think what Carson said necessarily impacted my overall decision, but it did kind of add a little bit because you do question with all those kind of things. You know, how realistic is part A or part B or whatever of the movie, and from his standpoint, most of it was pretty realistic. So it's like, that does carry some weight when you can talk about how if a director can portray something that makes someone who actually experienced some modicum of what was going on think that it's realistic, then that's pretty good in my eyes. But anyway, next we went on to week 10, Con Men week. Steven Spielberg's Catch Me If You Can went up against Ridley Scott's Matchstick Men. This one went to Matchstick Men. If I remember correctly, I believe Nate, you and I went Matchstick Men. Steve went Catch Me If You Can. And yeah, that's how it was. That was it. This is probably, when I look back, this is probably the toughest week for me. I thought that, like, if I'm gun to my head asked which movie I enjoy more and would want to watch at any given point, I'm probably going to say Catch Me If You Can. And I might even think it was a better movie. But this is the one where the theme really became the great equalizer, because the idea was, which one captured the theme here. And I thought Matchstick Men went. And that's why I ended up going that way. And I think I was the deciding vote. Brandon, what did you feel on these?
I think Steve was right. Nodding along.
You don't hear me say
Absolutely
this often.
right.
This is the one week where I will maybe admit that my pick might have been wrong.
Ooh, recount.
Recount.
Yeah. Well, you understand,
Stop the count.
You understand that gives another one to Spielberg, so it only further elevates his win. Yeah, this is one where it's like every time I think of it, and I like both movies so much and so equally, but I do feel like I think I kind of feel the same way as Jeff, that if I were gun to my head asked like which one I just enjoy watching more, it might be Catch Me If You Can and not Matchstick Men. So I'm acknowledging this is the one week where I think I'll look back on it and say I might not have been right there. Other than that, I am spotless. Okay, never made a mistake in my life.
You're looking at
except
an
for that one
unblemished
week.
record of podcast
Yeah.
picks. So from there, we went to week 11. Follow the leader week. Steven Spielberg's Lincoln versus Ridley Scott's American Gangster. I believed I was the one, like Lincoln himself, standing up there on my own, championing Lincoln, and both the others went. Steve and Nate went for American Gangster. Brandon, where did you come out on this?
American Gangster.
Right. That's right.
It's so good.
I think this was the
Jeff's
only
a
week that I
sucker
was
for
on my
schmaltz.
own. So then we go to week 12, getting towards the final stretch here, was our Stranded week. This was the week where Steven Spielberg's The Terminal got Nate incredibly emotional, and Ridley Scott's The Martian was where he went up against. And I believe Steve and I went with The Martian, and Nate went with The Terminal. Did you actually go with The Terminal, or that was just kind of your...
Oh no, I
can't remember
for
on
the
it.
terminal. I had that whole tearful thing where I talked about the end and the American dream, and I still would stand by that. I really rewatching that movie has probably been my favorite rewatch of any movie that I've seen this season. I just really get won over by that movie.
Interesting. That's interesting praise. Brandon, what did you think?
So, The Terminal is easily one of my favorite Tom Hanks movies, and like I have always recommended that movie to a lot of people. And I want to say, when you guys were recording, I was like, well, The Terminal. Nate's right. Everybody else is wrong. But I've read the book again for a second time, and then I rewatched Martian. And I ended up going, I think maybe they might be right, just in the way. I think just from start to finish, the way it was made and the way they were able to do it, especially with Matt Damon doing so much of that by himself and conveying so much by himself. I think that just kind of... Tom Hanks had a lot of co-stars to go off of, and whereas Matt Damon did a lot by himself, and to me, and it was one of those, I ended up picking The Martian.
True.
But Nate,
Smart man.
everything you ever think of The Terminal, 100% agree with. It is an amazing movie, and like I said, one of my favorite Tom Hanks movies.
I would actually probably argue that The Martian might be Ridley Scott's most rewatchable movie. Definitely of the ones that we went over this season, but even still, to the rest of his catalog, I would probably argue that.
I would agree. It's one of my quote unquote favorite movies for that reason. It feels like a nice warm cup of tea.
Yeah, maybe the Gladiator would be the only other one that qualifies, as I think it has his most commercial appeal without sacrificing the auteur elements that make him Ridley Scott.
Yeah, definitely. So from there, so at this point, Ridley Scott had a commanding lead. Weeks to go, or 3 weeks to go, technically. But so next was the coming of age week. This was Steven Spielberg's E.T. versus Ridley Scott's White Squall. We, we tried hard to come up with a good theme on this one, and I think we all kind of agreed once we got into it and started going with the show that maybe this wasn't the best aligned of the two movies, but this was an easy victory for E.T. Brandon, please don't disappoint me and pick White Squall.
Well, here's the thing, Jeff. I agree. E.T.
Oh, no.
is so easy.
Okay. The fake out. All right. And then, so now we're at 7-6, and we're coming up to the final week, which was our Freaky Friday week just a couple weeks ago. And it was where we had all the actors who had crossover performances. We had 7 actors that we looked at. And if I recall correctly, the final tally was that we all picked 4 of the actors had better performances in Spielberg movies, and 3 had better performances in Ridley Scott movies, which of course meant that Spielberg won. Too many actors and movies to name, but Brandon, what did you think? Did you agree with?
I agree. I agreed with you. Spielberg just, I felt like gets the most out of, because he gets multiple good actors in a movie, and I feel like while Ridley Scott has a couple where he's gotten several good actors as a whole, just getting the most out of all the actors they have, I feel Spielberg does a better job at it.
There you go. So that tied us up going into the final week, which was just last episode. We rest our case. I pled my case for Steven Spielberg's War of the Worlds. Steve pled his case for Ridley Scott's Kingdom of Heaven director's cut. And I think I know which way you're going on this one, Brandon. But what did you? The ultimate winner was Nate siding with War of the Worlds for me. But Brandon,
it's Kingdom of Heaven, and I will tell you, Steve, even if it hadn't been Kingdom of Heaven, your closing argument would have completely pushed me over the edge to Kingdom of Heaven.
Why, thank you. I appreciate it. It came from the heart, and I think really we won the argument. I think Nate voted not for War of the Worlds, but for Steven Spielberg.
Can I speak more to that? This is my big profound point to make. Because and you're not entirely wrong. I just can't. Steve, you referenced like this legal thing, like the sniff test of like.
The red face test. Can you stand in front of a judge and say it without being embarrassed, basically?
The red face test, and that's one that I mean, I wouldn't be embarrassed to say Ridley Scott is a better filmmaker. It just didn't feel right on a cultural level. It's impossible for me, regardless of week by week. And again, like if Ridley Scott would have clearly won, I would have given it to Ridley Scott. But the fact that it was tied, it's hard for me to look at the guy that made Jurassic Park and Schindler's List in the same year and be like, yeah, he's not, he's not as good.
I told you. I mean, I kind of feel the same way. I came into this being the Ridley Scott guy, but I think I maybe realized that I like Steven Spielberg a little bit better overall. The reasons that I thought I liked Ridley Scott growing up and all that are still valid, but they're less important to me than they were, and I like him now for different reasons. Whereas Steven Spielberg, when I'm going into a Steven Spielberg movie, I feel a sense of joy. There's gonna be please don't cut this part out. Even Schindler's List, but there's a sense of cinematic joy that you're going to be well taken care of in terms of a viewer of a movie. You're going to go on a journey here that is something that can only be done in this medium, and the master craftsman has you in his hands, and you're in for a good ride.
I think we also talked earlier this season about like it's okay, and I think we did this a lot this year, where it's okay to separate your favorite from what is the best. So like my favorite current filmmaker is David Fincher. But in this, and I like his movies. I love his movies. At the same time, I wouldn't ever say that David Fincher has been more important than Steven Spielberg. Even if I could line up several David Fincher films that I personally like more, I could probably do that with several filmmakers. I could do that with probably even Tarantino, maybe Scorsese to a certain extent. it's difficult for me to say that any of those people is more important than Spielberg, and that's okay. I think the analogy I gave earlier in the season is like, Sgt. Pepper's is the Beatles' best album, but is it them at their most Beatles? Like, it doesn't, it's okay to still say that, Rubber Soul is your favorite Beatles album. And I feel like that's kind of what we ended up doing this season, and particularly you, Steve, of like, you can say Ridley Scott is your favorite filmmaker and also acknowledge that Steven Spielberg is just more important culturally. And you can look outside of your framework and still think that and say that and like both these things at the same time.
And had you actually compared Kingdom of Heaven and War of Worlds to themselves instead of the directors, that's what you would have been saying at the end of the last episode.
I would have said that I still think War of the Worlds is a terrific movie. I think they're very even. I think that's like if I were grading it just as a normal week, I would say those two are very, very even.
Right now, I feel like I am the Kansas City Chiefs after the 2022 Super Bowl, and Steve's over there complaining about a holding call in the end zone and how he actually should have won because he won the argument and won the week, and Nate voted on full body of work and not just the movie at hand. How I'm feeling right now.
Nate had a full jersey hold of it. So my ultimate winner was Ridley Scott. And I said disagreed on 4 movies. That included last week, 3 if you didn't count last week, because if you went off of Ridley Scott's 8-6, we wouldn't have had to have had last week.
But to our point, will you admit you agree that Spielberg is culturally more important?
Oh, 100%.
This is the point. I think this is what we learned about ourselves. This is it. We're coming to the final answer. This is what we learned about ourselves. Like we just
and
Spielberg, there's just something about that identity. It's so synonymous with Americana that it's difficult to separate him from that.
Yeah, like if 99 out of 100 people you're going to say Steven Spielberg, they're going to have a very, very clear image that comes to their head. Then when you have that same 100 people or a different 100 people and you say Ridley Scott, 75 of them might have a very clear image, and then another 20 might have to think about it for a minute, and then 5 or so would be like, who's Ridley Scott? And it's just, whereas there'd only be like the one person who lived under a rock for the last 40 years who doesn't know who Steven Spielberg is. Even though Ridley Scott is still a name brand, like I think there's not that same level of recognition that you have with Spielberg.
And again, I think that Spielberg has affected, I think this is really prevalent when you look at, like, we talked about, like, gaming, how there's, like, a whole entire modern video game culture that Saving Private Ryan basically invented. Like, you just asked the question of, like, when you think of Steven Spielberg, what do you think of? One of the first things I think of is, like, the old school Universal Studios theme park in Florida. It had a bunch of, like, the Jaws ride. It's his legacy permeates. It actually goes outside of the movies in these really, really big ways. And I just don't think we think of any other filmmaker of our lifetime quite in that way like we do Spielberg.
And, along the same lines of what you were talking about, talking about what we learned through this season, I think the big thing for me, I came into this season thinking that this was going to be a runaway for Steven Spielberg because of what we just talked about, right? That he's that cultural touchstone guy. Everyone knows Spielberg. Everyone loves at least one Spielberg movies. They're just, even if you don't like him as your favorite, you still gotta respect the man, right? And the talent. And so I came in thinking that, okay, what are we gonna do when it's like 5-0 Spielberg in week 5? How are we gonna make this interesting? And we didn't have to cross that bridge because it just became interesting on its own, because I realized that, what I kind of talked about earlier, that the sort of theme was the great equalizer here, because, I think that's what Ridley Scott does better than Spielberg is sort of themes. Sometimes it's a big swing and a miss, but he's always going for it. And when he hits it out of the park, he really does. Whereas, Spielberg's constantly getting doubles and he'll occasionally knock one out, but I think there's kind of we're really heating up with the baseball references on this episode, but
just in time for football season.
Yeah,
we're very timely on this podcast.
Right? There we go. Steve, Ridley Scott's always going for the Hail Mary. Sometimes it gets swatted down, but other times, whereas Spielberg, he's dinking and dunking. He's giving your 15-yard slants, whatever. There we go. There's a football reference. I got them all. You want a basketball one? Let's do this. But seriously, with Ridley Scott, I kind of was like, I was shocked at how close they actually were, sort of in just their filmographies and talent levels. And I think I kind of mentioned at some point through the season. I think the only real difference here is you talk about Ridley Scott and Steven Spielberg. I think their ceilings are equally high, but their floor, Ridley Scott's floor is much lower, and Spielberg's is a bit higher. And that's ultimately, like when Nate, you're talking about body of work, right? I mean, that's what you get. And I think there's also that sort of, for one reason or another, Spielberg's name became attached to these sort of cultural touchstone movies a little bit more than Ridley Scott's did, right? Like most people know about Alien and Blade Runner, but I think when most people think about Alien, they probably think James Cameron before they think Ridley Scott. And with Blade Runner, they think Harrison Ford before they think Ridley Scott, right? But when you think Jaws, you think Steven Spielberg. When you think Jurassic Park, you think Steven Spielberg. And even Raiders of the Lost Ark with Harrison Ford, you're still like, that's Spielberg's brand right there, even with how iconic Harrison Ford was in that role. So yeah, it's even going up against all that, I was still kind of surprised at how much I was like, you know what, this isn't as far off as I thought, especially when I think for me, my favorite rewatch was Thelma and Louise. And that was the one where I really where it really hit me during this season, where I was just like, man, I knew he was good, but there's just some really great filmmaking here. And this is really one of them.
I don't think we could have picked any better pair to start this experiment. It kind of all worked perfectly. I mean, I think you put these two together, and is there any more influential pair of Western filmmakers in the last 50 years? At least our lifetimes, for sure. Like, just look at their body of work since the early 80s, and it's astounding. So this was a fun thought experiment.
It's just a tease for season 2. I'd say the only one that goes up there with them is probably Scorsese. I mean, he's maybe the one that you would think of as like. He's still.
That's what I was gonna say.
He's still making film. I think Francis Ford Coppola, who directed a movie called The Godfather, that I don't know if
never heard of it.
What? I don't know if have you heard of this one, Steve?
So they even made a sequel to it. I would have at one time maybe said.
I bet the sequel was horrible because they're usually not that good.
Yeah, the sequel's never as good. It's impossible.
Right.
Never as good.
At one time, I probably would have said him, but he hasn't continued making movies in the way that Spielberg and Scorsese have. And Ridley Scott, for that matter. So, yeah.
Yeah, we need to talk more about that, by the way. Ridley Scott's 85?
Well,
he's getting up there.
He's made more movies, though, in the last 20 years than he did in the previous 20. Like, he's really ramped it up these last years. One thing to add to kind of what you were talking about with Scorsese, like, I still remember when Scorsese won his first and only
85.
to this point Oscar, that it was up on the stage to give it to him was Steven Spielberg, Francis Ford Coppola, and James Cameron, all just who had, it was Steven Spielberg, Francis Ford Coppola, and George Lucas. And George Lucas was the only one that hadn't won an Oscar, of course, but created maybe the most cultural touchstone of all of them. But anyway, that was just kind of an idea of like when you get those three directors on the stage at the same time to hand you're doing Oscar something to someone like Scorsese, that kind of shows you what pantheon you're talking about here.
So it's interesting that you mentioned. I don't want to go too far afield, but the hypothesis I put forward about any two filmmakers, having as big of an impact. I didn't even think about James Cameron until you just said him, and he's made more money than probably all these guys put together at this point. I don't know if that's true, but between the Avatars and Titanic and Terminator, I mean, there's something. Steven Spielberg has this cultural resonance, and he's made a shit ton of money. But he just, like Nate said, there's something about he just captures this essence of Americana, and he's a part of the fabric of our kind of culture in a way that like Avatar isn't, you know. I mean, obviously I'm picking and choosing James Cameron movies because others are like Terminator, but it seems like for a while there, every movie Spielberg made just became something that was just integral to pop culture and still is. And that's crazy. It would have been kind of nuts to come up with anybody besides him to win our first duel.
So real quick, I was looking this up. Not counting Gladiator that comes out next year, but in the last 10 years, or since 2010, he's made 10 movies. Ridley Scott, and in the 2000s, he made 9 movies, and then in the 90s, he only made 4 movies, and then it gets smaller and smaller going back. But the last 20 years, he's made more movies than the first 2 decades he was making. And hell, 2017, he released Alien Covenant, All the Money in the World, 2021, The Last Duel, and House of Gucci.
He's been prolific in the last half decade to decade. It's really quite stunning.
At 85.
I wonder what he's... Yeah, at 85.
Some of that may be a financing thing. Like at a certain point in his career, it was hard for him to get money. And probably, well, he said just after Gladiators, when I think it really started to pick up, where it's just like he kind of got to a point where it's like, I'm Ridley Scott. I'm making this movie. Any actor that I would want to be in the movie and would want to work with me, and I can finance a movie very quickly and prepare a shooting schedule and a pre-production and a production schedule that allows me to make this movie. And that I think he just kind of wields that power. So probably a lot of that is actually kind of a money thing that he can just, if Ridley Scott decides he wants to make a movie and he has an idea for a movie and he has a script or a screenwriter who's like, he's going to make that movie. And probably that was not the case even after Alien. I mean, that was probably not the case in the 80s or the 90s.
So an interesting fact, if you look through all this, so his first movie was in 77. Not until White Squall and G.I. Jane did he do a movie for the same distributor, and that was Buena Vista. And then, again, no movie back-to-back for another one until 20th Century Fox was Kingdom of Heaven and A Good Year in 2005 and 2006. But then 2012 to 2017, he did 5 pictures back-to-back for 20th Century Fox. So he obviously signed a deal in there to get the funding he wanted to do whatever he wanted. Which came right off the heels of Bodies of Lies and Robin Hood.
Well, something too, I think, for both of these directors that probably doesn't mean too much to the lay people like us, but to Hollywood it matters. I don't hardly recall hearing any real issues in terms of like production issues related to the director, right? Like there's the famous Spielberg and the shark doesn't work in Jaws, and we talked about how they started shooting Gladiator with like 40 pages of a script or whatever. So like there are some things that they have to work through, but in terms of like issues that you might hear some other directors go through, where they're having to fire actors and get different actors, and there's production delays and they're massively over budget. You never hear that about these two, and that matters to Hollywood. So like that's why Clint Eastwood gets basically anything he wants, because he shoots on schedule, he raps on schedule, he comes in under budget, and you can get money when you do that. And both these directors, for the most part, I'm sure if I went back through, we could find some outliers there, but for the most part, you hear about pretty clean productions for most of most of what they've done. I think that's an important factor too.
What if that's just
All
how
right,
the episode ended? Like Jeff just talking. That was it? Did they just like Sopranos the ending of their podcast?
All right. See you next year. So with that, I think we've kind of put a little bit of a bow on the season 1 here. So I think we can kind of talk about. I think we've all agreed on what we're going to do for season 2. So we can reveal that now. Nate, do you want to give the big reveal here?
I will give the big reveal. So season 2 is we've mentioned several times Martin Scorsese, and what we've really liked doing is comparing two filmmakers that maybe aren't often compared a lot and kind of finding similar thematic themes. So we're going to talk about Martin Scorsese versus Spike Lee. So two filmmakers that have had really interesting careers, who have courted a lot of controversy through their careers, who make films very indebted to sort of like racial or ethnic minorities. Martin Scorsese does a lot of movies about Italian Americans and their experience in the United States. And obviously, Spike Lee makes a lot of movies about the black experience, speaking to the black experience in the United States. So, interesting thematic frameworks that move through a lot of their movies. And we are excited to compare those filmmakers, potentially have some interesting guests on to talk to us about some of those movies. And honestly, for next season, for me, just watching a lot of movies, because I will tell you, there's a lot of movies from both these filmmakers that I have still not seen. I've seen all the big famous ones, but I just haven't. There's a lot of like really big ones from both of them that I have still never seen.
I'm going to be quite a bit less familiar with the movies from these two than I was for this current season. So, which is good, because the movies that I was not familiar with in this one, like, I really enjoyed watching them. I'm really glad that we had this so that I could see some of them. And I'm going to be the same, especially with Spike Lee, because I've seen a good amount of Scorsese, but with Spike Lee, I've definitely slept on quite a bit of his filmography. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, my favorite part of this entire endeavor has been watching some of these classics that I never, for whatever reason, didn't see growing up or as an adult. So this will be really fun, because I'm in the same boat as you all. I saw Do the Right Thing for the first time 2 years ago, so I'm really lacking.
Speaking of classics, we're changing it. It's going to be Francis Ford Coppola going up against nobody. We're just going to watch The Godfather.
Just The Godfather over and over again. Parts 1 and 2.
I would take part in that podcast.
Geez,
so that's that's how much I like it.
So yeah, but that parts 1 and 2. We don't need to talk about part 3.
We'll do The Godfather versus Carlito's Way. There you go.
There you go.
Sure. We'll bring
that'll stand the test of time, right?
There we go. Scarface. I think that's a more appropriate one, right?
You know, I've seen Scarface. I've never seen Carlito's Way.
You almost had us on that one. I would give you more run or more leeway for missing Scarface than I will for
really. I'm a white guy who was in college in the 2000s. Jeff,
and we all had the poster on our wall. Everyone seemed to miss the entire point of the movie. Really, I think had never seen the end of the movie and what the fate that befalls that character. But I guess we wanted to emulate that. And
yeah, I turned it off after he bought the tiger. I don't know what happened. Okay, hate to break it to you, but anyway. So I think that puts a nice, tidy little bow there on season 1 of Duel of the Greats for us. Man, I have had a blast with talking about these movies with you guys. I hope it has been the same for you, and I hope it's been the same for all the listeners here, guys. Any parting thoughts here as we sign off for season 1?
I have immensely enjoyed this, and I have gained new respect for my new friends and my cousin and some of the opinions that they have given about these movies. And I really do. I went into it as a very strong Spielberg guy, and I think I have a new respect for Ridley Scott and his body of work and what he has done for American and British cinema, world cinema.
Well, I've enjoyed listening to the three of you have these discussions. I know I don't partake as much as everyone else, and I just chime in every once in a while, but it has been quite fun playing little back end, giving you guys any info you ask for, but just listening to the three of you's dynamic has been very, very fun and interesting on my end.
It's just frozen. Stunned into silence.
He's still muted for me. Steve, why don't you give us your thoughts while Jeff figures out his life?
Can he hear us?
Can you hear us? Is he awake?
On my side, he's frozen into like the what's the girl, the pole vaulter girl who had like the little face like with the curved lip.
What was her name? Michaela something.
Oh,
Maroney
you
or
hear
something.
us?
Yeah. He was frozen in that face for a long time.
We went 15 and a half weeks with no tech. Well, no major tech issues.
One horrible tech issue on my part, but other than that,
I had my Wi-Fi spot moved a couple weeks ago, but it's been fine since then. I don't know what it is about tonight that's been causing the issues.
Alien.
You streaming something somewhere? Is the wife up?
They are probably streaming something. No, probably about it. They are. So because they're watching something, it's streaming. They might both be watching separate things, which might be part of what it is. But
are you close enough to run a cable?
Anyway, no.
I mean,
that's the whole reason.
Imagination limited
I did it was because I wasn't close.
Cut off again. You're making a point.
I'm sorry.
Jeff,
we need to end this. We need to end the episode.
Wrap it up.
Wrap it up.
All right.
Do I still need to say something to wrap it up? Okay. All right. And with that will conclude season 1 of Duel of the Greats, folks. Thank you all for taking this journey with us. We truly appreciate it. Thank you for listening, and we hope you'll come back for next season. Definitely stay posted to social media. We will post when that will go live. It'll probably be next year in 2024, but keep your eyes peeled for that. And in the meantime, we may drop another special episode here or there, but if you have any movie-related questions or tidbits or anything you want to pass along, feel free. So until next season, thanks a lot for listening, and we'll see you next time.